Okay, so now we're going to be graphing linear equations, and we're going to be doing it one of two ways. We're either going to find the x and the y intercepts, or we're going to create a table. So first thing is x and y intercepts. To find the x and y intercepts, all you're going to do is plug a 0 in for the other variable. So if we're finding the x intercept, if I want to find x, I got to plug a 0 in for y. And that makes the whole y term cancel. And then I would just solve for x, get x alone, right? Same thing for y. If I want to solve for the y-intercept, I plug a 0 in for x. That whole term cancels, and I solve for y. So whatever intercept you're solving for, just plug a 0 into the other variable and solve. That's it. Okay, so let's do a few examples. Then we'll come back up here to the table. So we've got 3 examples here. Graph each equation by using the x and the y intercepts. We have 2x plus y equals -2. If I want to find the x-intercept, I'm going to plug a 0 in for y. 2x plus 0 equals -2. 2x equals -2. Divide both sides by 2, and x equals -1. So on my x-axis, I put a dot on -1. Okay, and then for the y-intercept, I plug a 0 in for x to solve for y. So 2 times 0 plus y equals -2. This just goes away, and I get y equals -2. So on the y-axis, I go down to -2, put a dot. And then once you have 2 dots, you can just connect them with a straight line. That's it. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Let's do 2 more. 3x minus 6y equals -3. To solve for the x-intercept, I plug a 0 in for y. When I plug a 0 in for y, this whole thing turns into 0. So I end up with 3x equals -3. Divide both sides by 3, x equals -1. So on my x-axis, I go back 1. To find y, I plug a 0 in for x, and then that whole thing goes away. So -6y equals -3. Divide both sides by -6. Y equals +1/2. So on my y-axis, I'm going to just go up a half. Right? So then I can connect my 2 dots with a line. So it'll look something like that. So all you're doing is finding your x and your y intercepts, where I cross y, where I cross x, and you're connecting them with a line. That's it. Last one, number 3. To find the x-intercept, I plug a 0 in for y. That goes away. -2x equals -2. Divide both sides by -2, so x is going to equal +1. To find y, I plug a 0 in for x, so that whole thing goes away, and y equals -2. On the y-axis, I go down to 2 and put a dot. So I've got my line here, looks something like this. And I'm done. That's it. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys, okay? The other way we can graph is using a table, right? So, and they made it look complicated here because they gave you x, they gave you y, and then they also gave you a column where they showed you how they got y from x, right? And then they listed out x and y. All you have to do is write x, y, that's it, and then plug in your values, that's it. And then once you find an x and a y, then you just graph the ordered pair, okay? So we're going to do that down here. I have an x and a y. Now you can pick any numbers you want. It takes at least 2 numbers, 2 points to draw a line, so you need at least 2. We're going to use 3. And I like to stick with right around the middle here, so I'm going to use -1, 0, and 1 for each of my tables. Now sometimes it tells you what to plug in, but if it doesn't, you just need to pick a few numbers depending on where your graph is, what it looks like. If your graph is not located around the origin, if it was way off in bigger numbers, then you might have to pick bigger numbers for x, but here we're at the origin. So these work. Okay, so if I plug in -1 in for x, what am I going to get for y? 2 times -1 is -2. If I plug a 0 in for x, what am I going to get for y? 2 times 0 is 0. And if I plug a 1 in for x, what am I going to get for y? 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, so once I have these, now I can graph my ordered pairs. -1, -2. I'm going to go backwards 1, down 2. 0, 0, over 1 up 2. So I've got about 3 dots here. I can connect them with a straight line, and I'm done. It's not a super straight line, but it's supposed to be. Okay, next column, I have a few numbers I'm going to plug in for x. That'll give me a y, and I can graph those. So if x is -1, -1 minus y equals -1. I'm going to add 1 to both sides of my equal sign. -y equals 0. So if -y equals 0, then y equals 0, right? So when x is -1, y is 0. What about when x is 0? 0 minus y equals -1. So -y equals -1. Well, I don't care what -y is. I want to know what -1 is. If I change the sign on the left, I have to change the sign on the right. So that's +1. And then when I plug a 1 in for x, 1 minus y equals -1. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. -y equals -2. And if I change the sign on the left, I have to change the sign on the right. So +y would equal +2. Once I have all my ordered pairs, back 1 up 0, over 0 up 1, over 1 up 2. There's my line. Last one. X plus 2y equals 4. If I plug a -1 in for x, -1 plus 2y equals 4. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. 2y equals 5. And so that one actually is not going to work out for me so well, right? I'll have like a fraction. So maybe I try a different number. What if I tried -2? What if I tried -2 in for x? Then I would add 2, so I would get 6. Divide by 2, y equals 3. So when x is -2, y is +3. When x is 0, I get 2y equals 4, so y equals 2. And when x is 1, I'm going to get an odd number again. I don't really want that, so I'm going to use a 2 instead of a 1. 2 plus 2y equals 4, minus 2 on both sides. 2y equals 2, so y equals +1. Okay, so now I can graph these. Backwards 2 up 3, over 0 up 2, over 2 up 1. So here's my 3 ordered pairs. You want to pick numbers for x that don't give you a fraction for y. Okay, so when I put 1 in here, I had to add -1. When I started with -1, then I knew I had to add 1, which made this an odd number. Well, that's fine, but then I was going to have to divide by 2, so I didn't really want an odd number here because then I'd get a fraction. So I had to use numbers for x that would make this an even number. Then I could divide by 2 and I wouldn't get a fraction. Okay, hopefully that made sense. Let me know if you have questions. The last thing that you have to do this week is your word problem sheet. So I wanted to just kind of pick and choose and go over a couple. Graphing linear equations. Number 1, one football season, the Carolina Panthers won 4 more games than they lost. This can be represented by y equals x plus 4, where x is the number of games lost and y is the number of games won. Write this linear equation in standard form. So we have y equals x plus 4. We need to get x and y on the same side of the equal sign. Right? In standard form, x and y have to be on the same side. And then the plain number, which would be 4, has to be by itself. So I'm going to subtract x here, subtract x here. These go away. I want x in front of y, so I'm going to write -x plus y equals 4. And remember, there were 2 rules about a that we talked about. A, the number in front of x, cannot be a fraction, and it cannot be negative. So since this is negative, I need to multiply everything by -1 to change the sign. So -1 times -x is +x. -1 times +y is -y. And -1 times +4 is -4. This would be my equation in standard form. ax plus by equals c. A is 1, B is -1, and C is -4. It's the same thing as this. I just changed all the signs. Okay, number 2. I'm not going to solve every one of these. I just want to do a couple, go over them with you. Pick Me Up Towing Company, Pick 'em Up Towing Company charges $40 to hook a car and $1.70 for each mile that it's towed. Here's the equation. The total cost Y for X miles towed. Determine the y-intercept. Describe what the value means in this context. So for the y-intercept, remember I had to plug a 0 in for X. So Y equals 1.7 times 0 plus 40. Well, if this is $1.70 per mile and the miles are 0, what do you get for the y-intercept? What is Y going to equal? And what does it mean? When I've gone 0 miles, what's the automatic charge to hook up your car to the towing company, to the towing truck, right? So you need to solve for Y and then kind of analyze it. Well, what does it mean? It's not just numbers. They represent something. So what's the situation? Number 3, write and graph an equation. You should be able to do that from this word problem. Number 4. I think the rest of them are pretty straightforward. If you guys have questions on them, let me know. Just make sure you're reading what they ask. And all of these have to do with what we just went over with 3-1.